So today we're joined by Joe Pattison, VP of Marketing at EMW Global, the sports and entertainment agency helping some of the world's biggest athletes, brands and rights holders navigate the rapidly evolving media landscape. Joe joins us to discuss the findings of the new Athlete Brand Economy Report commissioned by EMW Global and X+Y Market Intelligence ahead of the current FIFA World Cup. It'd be good to learn a little bit more about yourself, Joe, and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Chris, for having me on. So as you mentioned, I'm the VP of Marketing at a company called EMW Global, based in London. EMW Global is a sports marketing agency which spans the markets across the globe. We focus most of our work on emerging markets. We were originally founded as a business in China and Hong Kong. So that's the heritage of the business. And we still do a lot of work in China and then across kind of India, Southeast Asia. We have offices in South Africa and then LATAM. And we're a sports marketing agency, kind of specialize in three key areas: talent representation, brand partnerships, and then the area that I primarily oversee, which is marketing and activation, so content, social media, localization, activation, experiential, that kind of thing. So I joined EMW Global last year. Having spent 6 years in Singapore, my background is more kind of traditional media. I started at Dentsu. I was at Dentsu for about a 9-year stint before I moved into the world of sport while I was in Singapore. So yeah, great to be on.
Cool. That's amazing. That's a cool journey as well. So for anyone who's not sort of seen the report yet, can you sort of give us a bit of info about what the report actually is and what's the thought behind it and what are some of the findings in it?
Yeah, for sure. So we partnered with a fantastic data agency called X+Y. So X+Y essentially track thousands and thousands of data points to help to quantify sports and athletes and how much they are driving visibility and value from what they're doing through digital platforms, social media being a key driver of that, but also things like search, digital platforms as well. And we had initial conversations with X+Y a while ago, and what we found really interesting was the way that they were able to quantify both the visibility of an athlete through those kind of quantifiable metrics of reach, engagement, things like that, to create a VIE score, so proprietary number that each athlete has against their name. Also, how well they're able to commercialize that visibility into actual value. And it resonates well with what we do as an agency. We are across IP representation, marketing activation, ultimately brand partnerships and commercial value for the people we represent. So there's a lot of synergy really in terms of the data that the X+Y guys track and what we offer as a service. So we did a deep dive into the data and created the Athlete Brand Economy Report. Really, the focus is that over time, more so in recent years, the athletes are driving the conversation. It's not just brands, rights holders. It's really individuals that are starting to come to the fore more. And we had a look at all of the data and kind of pulled out some key insights ahead of the World Cup. And we're now looking post World Cup, obviously a key period for us, at some of the key learnings from the how things changed during that period, because the data that we're tracking is very reactive and it's based on specific moments and how athletes are able to capitalize on those moments as well. So yeah, that's the concept of the report.
Yeah, that's interesting because I noticed that obviously with the World Cup itself, you had people like Erling Haaland, who potentially before the World Cup wasn't as well known in the US. Suddenly he's now quite well known in the US and kind of they've really adhered to him. They sort of like attach themselves to him. And also Vozinha, the Cape Verde goalkeeper, who went from sort of nothing in terms of followers or minimal followers to suddenly loads, and he's now got a move on the back of it. So is that sort of thing that you see a lot of, and how one tournament can suddenly catapult somebody's brand to the next level?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, those two examples are the ones that we find really interesting from the World Cup itself. Haaland is, I think personally, is a fantastic example of where authenticity really still matters for athletes. Because like you say, he was, I think, you were looking at Messi, Ronaldo really as the two primary candidates for who we would expect to drive the most visibility and value during the tournament, just based on, who they are, the followers they have, the numbers they're already generating. And also the fact is, most likely is the last time that they'll both play at a World Cup, or, given that we thought that 4 and 8 years ago, I'm not sure. But, so that was where everyone's attention was really, in terms of that. We thought that would be what would happen. But like you said, I think it's really the unexpected stories that become really interesting and valuable. And Haaland, one, I think, like I said, is the authenticity of him as a human being and the way that he clearly manages his own socials. Most of these guys have big teams around them to make sure everything's curated, but he's, walking around with a raccoon and kind of just doing what he wants to do. And he's generating a lot of visibility and value off the back of it. Vozinha is another great example, as you mentioned, of where an individual athlete can just go from zero to hero literally overnight. I think he gained 10 million followers in a day, and last I checked, I think he's at 40 million. And every time I say a number, it seems to have increased. So, and as you mentioned, he's got value off the back of it. He's one of the most in-demand athletes from a commercial point of view, and he's also got a move off the back of it. He's got a new club when he didn't have one beforehand, and I'm sure a big part of that is actually the social value that the club have seen from signing. And yeah, there's a number of different examples around that. There's a lot of different African athletes who drove pretty massive visibility that in Western markets we might not see as much, but a number of the South Africa athletes that drove huge visibility and value during the tournament. And we love to kind of discover more about these opportunities and these stories from the athletes. One, because it's just, it's interesting and it's insightful for how we see sports marketing and the progression, but also it presents opportunities potentially for brands and others to partner with these athletes and to capitalize on the momentum that they generate.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, so interestingly from that, obviously, how do you go about approaching the partnerships, opportunities and things like that? So if you have an athlete like, say, Vozinha, who's kind of suddenly come out of nowhere, grown rapidly, I guess there's ways to tie that with campaigns where you could almost replicate the journey with the brand that you're talking about, for example, like maybe an underdog story of a smaller brand and then kind of align it to him. Is that the kind of thing you look at when you partner with brands? Is it more about a fit, or is it just what could work, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, it always has to fit, really. I think the partnerships that tend to not feel as authentic are the ones where it's a bit more forced, right? So even though Vozinha clearly has this massive growth, if he partners with the wrong brand, it doesn't look authentic from the brand point of view, and it doesn't look authentic from Vozinha's point of view either. It just looks like, from both sides, it's trying to just capitalize on momentum in the wrong way. We go through a process with our brands and also with the IP that we represent directly. So we have a suite of guys and girls that we do represent directly, that we obviously are continuously working on them on brand partnerships. Likewise, we work on the brand side. And a big part of what we do is to understand the brand's KPIs, the brand's objectives, what are they trying to achieve, and we help them find the right IP, number one, and also help them to identify the markets and the activation around the partnership to make sure that they're getting the maximum value from it. Because like you say, if it needs to be the right brand for the right IP, or it's going to feel less and less authentic. And especially, in recent years with so many different brand partnerships coming to the fore from an athlete point of view, those that feel most authentic are the ones where the brand fits the partner, the IP, and then it's activated with efficiencies. Yeah, it's not just about the IP and the trajectory, it's also about the brand fit.
Yeah, so how would you say social media has kind of fundamentally changed the relationship between athletes, fans, and sort of traditional sports organizations?
It's accelerated things massively, for sure. Social is really almost the first consideration now, you say, when it comes to sports partnerships and the metrics that are driven behind it. It's really allowed athletes to be personalized in the way that they speak to their audiences, to get their own points of view across in the right way, to partner with brands in the ways that they see as most effective. I'd say on the flip side of that, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's a bit of a dangerous territory when it comes to athletes specifically, because done in the wrong way, it can really take away from the authenticity of the individual. And activating partnerships and then localization, for example, of content in the wrong way can go the opposite direction to where you want it to go. So a big part of what we do is to make sure that localized social content into markets, which is a big part of our East Midlands West EMW identity, that we're doing that in the most effective way that ensures that the athlete visibility is activated in the right way. It's essentially just becoming kind of guardians of their identities, right? So when we're going into local markets, we're speaking to audiences with authenticity to them as an athlete, but also to the local market and the way that they want to be spoken to. And to us right now, I think that's kind of missed when it comes to activation of partnerships.
Yeah, I remember seeing one of the first brands I kind of really interacted with was, Mesut Ozil had a really good brand, and he kind of like developed his own brand, and it sort of felt like he was quite savvy when it came to the brand side of things and the image of who he was. Do you find now that a lot more of the athletes at all different levels are sort of considering that from a sort of younger age?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years, there's loads of examples where Cole Palmer has his own brand, Lamine Yamal has his own brand, and I think it's something that's going to become more common across the industry. And the age thing is definitely an interesting point. It's happening younger and younger for sure, because I think a lot of these guys have more people around them, managers, agents, agencies that are working with them sometimes in good ways and sometimes in not so good ways to help them to build their own personal brands. We like to work as much as we can with the IP that we represent to give them the right guardrails to build their own brands, but it has to be done in a way that's authentic. I think there are some examples clearly where a brand has been built alongside an IP and it's not necessarily that authentic, and you can see that straight away in the way that it's brought to light. But at the same time, we need to make sure that, especially these guys that are 17, 18, 19, that have 50 million followers, that they're given the right advice and the right opportunities to maximize on their brand without being taken advantage of, I guess is the way to put it. So, I think it's going to just continue to increase, and there'll be examples where you might look at it and think, God, that's terrible. And there'll be examples where you look at it and think, actually, that's really interesting. And it brings to life who they are as a person and their interests and what they actually care about and they enjoy. And those are the ones that I think will resonate best with people. But it also, from a kind of long-term commercial perspective, it gives them a starting point so that they're not just going off and taking any partnership that comes to them or taking the wrong kinds of partnerships, because it doesn't work with who they are and what they're trying to build. So that's also an area that we're heavily invested in with our IPs.
Yeah. So I was thinking about when I was a kid, I used to play football, and you'd score a goal, you do a celebration, and kind of it would be more of a celebration type thing. But I guess now you mentioned Cole Palmer's celebration of the kind of like, the cold thing, same as Morgan Rogers, to be fair. That kind of almost plays into the brand now. It's almost like a signature celebration plays into the brand. And you're saying about Haaland's authenticity and how the reason why that works, I think, is because he is authentic. Whereas how difficult is it to create a differentiated brand, personal brand, that feels authentic as well? That must be quite tricky to do, and to maintain that voice when you've got multiple channels. Yeah, for sure. I think there are natural variations of it where it works effectively. I think the Palmer one it was just his celebration, and he built off the back of it, and he's now selling ice, which you can have your own opinions on. But it was at least built on something that was part of his identity naturally already. I think that you try to overplay it too quickly is where you'll run into challenges, like you say, right? It's ultimately your one IP, you're one person. There's only so much that you can do with what you have available to you, that if you try and push too hard too quickly, that's where you'll oversaturate your own content essentially, and you'll oversaturate your own brand identity, and you won't allow any room for progression. Ultimately, these guys, this is a secondary thing for them, right? Like their number one focus is they play football on a weekly basis and they make money doing that. And that's really where their energy and their efforts need to be put. So I think giving them longer term roadmaps and guardrails, like I said before, is probably the area where you'll see better long-term return on investment on something like this. Whereas you try and push something too hard too early. I think if Haaland got the wrong people around him right now and they tried to just absolutely slam his social content and commercialize what he's been doing, that's where it will just fall down straight away. Whereas you let him just continue to do what he's doing and be himself and be a bit strange online, and people will continue to enjoy looking at his content. Ultimately, it will come with the commercial opportunities that fit best for him as a person, rather than forcing stuff too quickly. That's a great point. I hadn't considered that as much, the kind of progression, and actually, like you said, almost kind of like slowly building it up and adding things in as they feel natural. I think that's a really good point. How does that fit in with clubs? So when you've got the clubs and you've got sort of like these superstars that you're buying that have their own individual brands, is there going to be a sort of a time in the future where you kind of find clubs aligning? They might already be doing it to some level, but aligning with certain brands, obviously for the commercial aspect, but also because it forwards their brand in a sort of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of examples where clubs have been looking to enter into markets, and they do that by partnering with brands that are big in that market, especially across Asia, China, especially. Clubs are interesting because they have, to a certain degree, they have more autonomy around the content they can create than athletes in some ways, but at the same time, they're semi-limited in terms of the way that they can kind of navigate commercialization of their content, and the brands that they're able to partner with it in that space. Yeah, like I said, I think that using social content, brand content as a club is a great opportunity to grow into specific markets. But equally, what happens quite often, and having spent time in Asia, you see it quite a lot, is that a club will enter a specific market with the ambition of commercializing that market and finding partners for the club overall. They'll invest a lot of time, effort, money, resource. They'll do a tour to a certain market. They might have a player from that market. And that means that it makes a lot of sense for them to go there, and then they lose the player or they lose the brand, or they, whatever happens. And all of that legacy is kind of lost. And you end up with a fan base in that might have been massive fans of that club, and then they disappear, and suddenly, it leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, I guess, from the local perspective, because for a lot of these Southeast Asian markets, especially, they have limited limited access to the clubs that they adore. So coming in and out like that is difficult. Whereas that's where the athlete side of it is really interesting, because these the fans across the globe will often follow the player from club to club to club to club. So if Yamal is 18, I think 19, he should have 15 years ahead of him, and he might stay at one club, or he might play for 10 different clubs, but his fan base that he's built will travel with him across those different clubs. And the clubs that are able to maximize on that following, coming with the players that they're signing, are the ones that will kind of maximize the value. But I do think it's a really tricky environment to manage club branding, continue to grow it in the right spaces, because it comes up and down so quickly, and it's also so tied to the performance of the team on the pitch, right? Whereas for an athlete, you're kind of, you're controlling your own destiny, and to a certain degree.
I've definitely seen more of that recently, where you had, when I was younger, it's kind of, you supported the team. You might like players from other clubs, or there might be the global superstars that you like as a player, but you wouldn't necessarily follow them and their club. But I've seen it a lot more recently, where you have some people who are completely sort of agnostic to a club, but they focus on a player and they follow the player. So they really sort of love Messi and they'll follow what he does, or like you said, Ronaldo or Yamal or people like that. And that's a really interesting thing, because it starts to shift the power, like you talked about earlier on, from essentially club to individual.
Yeah, it's a generational split. I think quite clearly generational split. So it's something that sorry to interrupt you, by the way, but it's something we saw with our report, is basically 25 and below, they follow players much more than they follow clubs. It's like a huge trend. I'm certainly above 25, and I'm a Crystal Palace fan, and they are my club. And the day I die, that would be my club. And I as much as they say I admire players and I love watching different players play football, that will always be the way that I approach it. But I think more and more, like you say, it's especially with the internationalization of the game, the younger generation almost care more about the player than the club more often than not.
We saw it in this World Cup as well, more so than I can remember from previous World Cups, where it was all about the superstars, and every conversation was about how the superstars were delivering. So whether it was Messi, Harry Kane, Jude Bellingham, Yamal, it was always around the superstars. Dembele, it's these people, Mbappe, like that. It was all the conversations around that, and it was actually quite an interesting shift, I felt, because previously you'd have that, but it wasn't as much. Whereas now it seems to be focusing on those individual stars and what they can bring, which is, you can definitely start to see that shift.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's, look at the stats from the tournament. I think there was 5 different players that scored over 6 goals, it was a tournament for the superstars, and they all delivered, which is great for the viewer. I think it's definitely steering more in that direction. It will be interesting to see, with Messi and Ronaldo, as I mentioned, probably ending soon, how that will shift, and who the new superstars will be, and whether they'll ever get to the levels that Ronaldo and Messi got to, both playing career-wise and also kind of social and digital metrics-wise, because there are a bunch of guys that are probably kind of getting close to it, but yeah, it would be interesting to see, I guess, in the next 10 years, if that's a continued trend of superstardom and whether it will change after the two greats of the game are not playing anymore.
Do you think, do you, EMW, is this something that you do as well? But like, if you look at sort of the maybe one of the first, or not one of the first, but a big brand in football, David Beckham, who now still has the brand that he commands, and that he is now still growing past the point of playing into obviously club ownership and the different things that he does. Is that something that you help maintain as well and can help with your clients? And also, do you see more of that as people transition from playing to punditry or whatever it is they're going to?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a few different examples. We represent a guy called Sasha Feinberg-Ngomazulu, who's a rugby player, plays for South Africa, fly half, one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world. He's 23. You know, we're looking with him at what 10, 20, 30 years looks like, because he knows in rugby, as with any sport, you have a career of 10 to 15 years. The earlier you build the foundations for longevity, the more success you're likely to have. So, you know, we're helping him with this brand building from a kind of a softer, visible perspective, but also about, from his point of view, how does he extend his career in around the world of rugby into, you know, business that is relevant to what he wants to achieve as a person. Equally, we work a lot with kind of ex-players. So we're with Olivier Giroud, who was a pundit at BBC. We do a lot of work with Michael Owen, who is very active with brand partnerships, more so in Asia and China. We do a lot of work with Michael. The earlier that athletes understand that they have a finite amount of time that they can do what they're doing for and start building towards where they want to get to past football, whether that's coaching, playing, punditry, like you say, I think, 90+% of pundits are ex-players. That doesn't look like it's changing anytime soon. Or whether it's just, pushing outside of the world of sport and into something that they have a passion for. Yeah, it's definitely something that we are helping to achieve. And we do it, like I said, from the starting point of building their brand and working with them. And we also help them find opportunities directly in terms of punditry or brand partnerships or stuff like that post their career.
Cool. So with the report itself, is there anything else on the horizon that you see? Was it sort of predicting anything over, say, the next 12, 18, 24 months that are sort of some of the changes or some of the things that are going to increase in that time?
There's a few things. I think one is athletes' understanding of this space is increasing. It's interesting as we speak to athletes more frequently that they are probably more cognizant of the value that they hold themselves. And things like this report are kind of bringing to fore why that is and the data that sits behind it. There's a very interesting, we did a panel with Emil Heskey. He has two sons, I think at 18, 19, both playing professionally. He actually used the data from this report of, X plus Y's data to help his son with his contract negotiation, because he saw from the metrics that there was actually a huge opportunity from a commercial perspective for Manchester City, the club he's at, that they're missing out on, because he had all of this visibility and this commercial value that was coming through in the numbers. But yeah, they basically used all that information to fuel the contract negotiation. And I think more and more that's going to become a common theme of athletes using data and information to understand their own value, both in terms of their playing career, but also outside of it. So that's one. I think second is going to be the global nature of the numbers. There's been significant increases in things like LATAM, Africa, particularly when it comes to driving huge metrics. And they're not showing any signs of decreasing over the next 1, 2, 3 years. I think the area which is behind versus where most of Europe sits is the commercialization of that visibility and the numbers there. So that's going to be an area where we will be focusing on for sure, is to identify those kind of gaps where there's huge opportunity. We need to find the right IP to work with and also the right brands to partner with to kind of commercialize that fan opportunity. So those are the two key areas really, is around athletes understanding this more themselves and then also localization of it into specific markets.
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan, and I've got my fingers tightly crossed at the moment that potentially we could do a deal for Vinicius Junior. One of the things about that deal that sounds quite interesting is that Real Madrid only it's like 50-50 in terms of image rights, whereas there's a potential there to give more on the players' side to the image rights in order to potentially get a deal over the line. When it comes to image rights and things like that, how does that work and how does that fit with the athletes themselves and the brand that they have?
It depends on, so that they're two separate things, right? So the club image rights is separate from the individual image rights. So, and is where it differs a lot from the Premier League versus a lot of European markets, is that European markets tend to have a bit more of a say on the club image rights for the player than in the Premier League. We work directly with athletes on their image rights, where there are sometimes limitations around what they can and can't do based on the contracts that they have with their clubs or their national teams. But more broadly, there is flexibility around where they're able to operate and the types of brands they're able to operate with. So yeah, we tend to work directly with IP in a managed capacity on their image rights, either from a global perspective, or we might manage specific markets, so like LATAM or Asia or China, and we identify the content and then we identify the commercial partnerships for them in those markets as well. So yeah, they are slightly separate, but it's very interesting. I mean, I would love to see Arsenal sign him. A guy on my team is a massive Arsenal fan, so I've told him I think it's not possible. But yeah, it's just interesting that things like image rights play such a huge part in a contract negotiation like this. When I guess as a Premier League fans, it's not something that we tend to see as much of. Yeah, it'll be interesting if you do manage to sign him, because he's a hell of a player.
Yeah, definitely. No, just when you said about Heskey and using the report, and yeah, his two sons, because both his sons are, from what I've seen of, I think one of them was really, really, really good as well for England as well, I think recently.
Yeah, Jaden,
yeah, really good player. But yeah, it's interesting using it in the contract negotiations. That's quite, really cool. So with that in mind, what's some of the things you love most about working with the clients you do, and what are some of the things that you sort of breaking down a bit how you work with your clients, and maybe some of the services and processes that you do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I work in sport, and I thank my lucky stars every day that I work in sport. There's a lot of people that would love to work in this space. I always say that just being in this environment is a privilege, to be honest. I love sport. I love everything about sport. And to be able to work so closely to football, but also to a number of other sports that I have a passion for is fantastic. Number one. So, I spent 9 years working in media, and as much as I loved the people I work with, and I love my clients, and I love the work that I did, I think there's just definitely a starting point which is closer to my heart when it comes to sport. In terms of what we do, the services we offer, what I do, I came into the business towards the second half of last year. As an agency, EMW was kind of more focused on brokering of partnerships, and that remains the case in a lot of ways. But there's a gap in how we were able to activate the partnerships we had, but also to build on the IP that we're acquiring. So my role is to essentially kind of support across the board from a marketing point of view. So we rebranded the whole agency in March of this year, entire new look for our website. That was kind of a starting point. I run all of the internal content, everything we do from a thought leadership perspective, everything we do from a content social perspective as an agency. And then I run the activations of the partnerships that we manage. And so there are some which are ongoing partnerships between rights holders and or IPs and brands. My team kind of manage that process. And then we also do all of the production activation. We have in-house creative capabilities that we offer to our clients and to our rights holders that help to bring to life the partnerships that we manage. So yeah, that's the kind of the focus of what I do. And then, as an agency more broadly, as I mentioned, we have a suite of IP that we manage on a day-to-day basis. So we have a team who support their progression through their careers, after their careers, find opportunities for brand partnerships for them. We support on their social content, their brand strategy, and then vice versa. We work with a lot of brands and identify the right sports properties for them to work with and invest with. And we work on everything from negotiation of that partnership through to contracting and then managing of the partnership afterwards as well.
Wow, yes, that's cool. So kind of full on end-to-end kind of sort of service and process.
Yeah, pretty much. We're a smallish company, I'd say, but we have a fantastic breadth of services, both in terms of what we're able to do and also the markets we're able to operate in, because we have teams on the ground across a lot of these emerging markets with our headquarters in London. But we are a full service sports marketing agency, really. There's not much that we aren't able to do as a team.
Which helps, I guess, with the maintaining of the brand and kind of the authenticity we talked about earlier on, that idea of if you have it in one place and everyone's kind of connected on that kind of brand, then delivering it in the way that you want consistently is going to be far easier than if you've got 10, 12 moving parts kind of with that process. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of brands, and I saw it a lot also with my my previous roles in Dentsu is a lot of brands work with a lot of different agencies for a lot of different things, and it becomes quite convoluted. It can become quite hard to know who's managing what, and where you sit in the process as someone who sat on the agency side of that. Often there were 5 or 6 different agency partners in a room trying to figure out how to respond to a brief, and it was who's doing it, where do I manage and where do I not. We kind of offer that end to end. We're very happy to work with partners where we need to. A rights holder or an IP might have a specific production team that they like to use, for example, and we're very happy to work with that production team and fit in where we need to. But we are more and more able to take a brief from ideation right the way through to execution. Yeah, it's exciting to be a part of that as a smaller agency team as well. That I personally love working in that environment of. Every day is different. You're working on a different brief, and you're a different part of that journey of the brief as well. Whereas, kind of the bigger agencies, you might be a small cog in a big wheel. We're a very small team, robust team, and we like to work quickly and also very personally, right? So Ps, they are managed by a few individual people, and who you're going to be speaking to. And similarly for the brands, we've worked with some brands for many years, and it's the same team that we're speaking to on a day-to-day basis. I think that's one of the reasons why people like working with us.
And what would you say? What's next for the business?
So we're 2 weeks post World Cup. It was a very busy period for us. As a bit of a pinnacle. As a sports marketing agency that's focusing on football as a key component of what we do. So that was a big success for us as an agency. It's now 4 years for the next World Cup, 2 years for the next Euros. So really our focus, I'd say, for the rest of this year is diversification. One is around markets. So I mentioned before, we're kind of moving into more of Southeast Asia and India as a big focus for us. That is holistically across sports and kind of maximizing the markets that we're already in. So doing a lot of work in LATAM. The Women's World Cup is going to be in Brazil next summer. So that's going to be a big focus for our Brazil team, working with them to find the right partnerships in either official FIFA capacity or in a more unofficial capacity. And then diversification into sports is the other area where we're really quite focused. So we're speaking to a few different opportunities in F1, in tennis, in golf. We have rugby already. We have 5 sports. We do quite a lot in. Diversifying our sporting collection of IPs is going to be important for us as we kind of bridge the cycles of the World Cups, which historically has been a big focus for the business. That's the 2 areas really where I'm helping to support the business in making sure we're efficient with the decisions we're making and making the right choices in terms of the markets we're going into and the sports that we're identifying and the IPs that we think can help to deliver value for us. It's really exciting. I think, as someone who, as I mentioned, is a fan of many different sports, it's really great to look into some different spaces. That will be the rest of this year. And as with everything, small agency, you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. It could be, and again, why it's exciting, right? So we can make very quick pivots and make decisions very quickly if we want to, if we see an opportunity that comes our way and we think it's right for us, then we'll pursue it. But yeah, I said broadly, those are the 2 areas: is markets and sports, and diversification of those 2 things.
Cool. And two questions that I ask every time. The first one is, what drives you mad about your industry?
That's a very good question. What drives me mad about the industry? I'd say from an agency perspective, more broadly, having worked across agencies for a long time, is how do I put this in the right way? The way in which things are so cyclical, and things are perceived as new or different that have happened, 5-10 years ago. I just see a lot of similarity and sameness in the industry world, I would say, and especially in the big industry landscape. I think that's the area. I don't know if it drives me mad, but it's something that I've noticed for sure in my experience in my career. Same in sports. There's nothing that drives me mad from the work we do, really, to be totally honest with you. I think what I find in general is that people that work in sports are happy in the work they do because they're working in sports. So they tend to be quite pleasant to work with, to be totally honest with you. There's obviously, from our point of view, when we're working with IPs especially, there can be difficulties around who is actually managing an IP. A lot of people often will claim to have a stake in an IP or a talent or a player, especially some of the names that we spoke about earlier with the World Cup. A lot of people come out of the woodwork and suddenly, they are their manager and they've been managing them for 10 years, and it's just not the case. So I'd say that's the big headache for an agency is to kind of sift through that and figure out where it actually lies in terms of management and agency partnerships. But like I said, I find quite broadly that people in sport are nice to work with. For me, that's what I enjoy. I like working with people that want to do the work they're doing. And I think that's more of the case in the world of sport for sure.
Cool. And then the second question is there a individual or a partnership or both that you've noticed recently that you think has really nailed the work that they're doing from an athlete perspective or a partnership perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the one that from a brand activation point of view from the World Cup and the Levi's one was the one that it's probably been spoken about quite a bit. It's not it's not an IP partnership necessarily, but I just love to see creative thinking, especially in the world of the World Cup, where there were $15 billion worth of sponsorship spend and so much, pre-thought planning and so many different activations. I think the genius of that Levi's, where they covered the Levi's logo on the stadium with and I just think that was brilliant. Like I saw it and I was like, wow, that's something that's cost them nothing incrementally, presumably, to the cost of covering the logo. And someone somewhere has just thought, we could do this in this way. And it's generated them however many millions of value in media and PR. That's one that that's the kind of thing that I love. I really like to see it where brands are creative and thinking on their feet. And often it comes with the unofficial sponsorships of things like the World Cup, where you might have a number of different brands that have spent a long time planning for this and putting a lot of dollars into their partnerships, but it's actually the ones that are creative and in making the most of a bad situation, I guess. I think that was what I loved about that one.
Yeah, they did it with Heinz as well, with the kind of blacked out the Heinz logo and they did an ad on the back of it, which was really good, I thought. Really clever. Cool. Well, it's been really great talking to you. Where can people find out a little bit more about yourself, about EMW? Where can people find out about you guys?
So our website, emw-global.com. Feel free to get in touch. The report is available on the website as well, that we spoke about earlier, the Athlete Brand Economy report. There's also a fantastic report on World Cup sponsorships, which is somewhat out of date now, given the World Cup finished 2 weeks ago. Keep an eye on the website for more thought leadership and more to come in the coming weeks and months. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Joe Pattison. You can find me on there if you want to reach out. Feel free to ping me a message.
Cool, and I'll put all those links in the show notes. It's been great talking to you. It'd be cool to do a follow up at some point, and just had a really good conversation. So thanks again.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.